Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Yes.
How are you, gentlemen?
Good. Are
Welcome
we in
back.
the Truman Show?
We are. One of these days we're going to have to do, I was thinking about, it's weird that you say that, or maybe it's not because I just inquired or intimated it. There are 3 billion Truman shows going on in social media right now, right? We all have our own feed. We all have our own unique feed that's unique to us. That has become a reality to us.
Yeah. And the algorithms are
Yes.
defining us further for us.
But we digress. That's a teaser for the next one.
Yeah. How we do it. We're all living in
I
our
give it
own
2
little,
thumbs down.
Exactly.
Yeah, our own little world.
Yeah.
The media.
2 thumbs down.
Yeah. So today,
What, the idea or the concept?
No.
Or the
The idea is fine. Yeah.
today, we haven't really unpacked this, which I think would be a fun topic. And so we're going to do it. We're going to talk a little bit about, with this industry, right? And really in any service industry, at some level, you deal with a lot of inconsistencies with your revenue, right? Monthly revenue, but your costs stay pretty consistent a lot of times. And so how do you pre-plan? How do you make sure that you can pay your bills on the months or the seasons where something goes awry or something you're not, you lose revenue, and how do you plan for that? How do you stabilize your revenue so that there's some consistency? How do you work with clients so that there's some consistency over a longer period of time?
We all want predictable revenue in business, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
That's the thing. I mean, it's high anxiety, and so the less predictable your revenue. I mean, restaurants deal with this, like service businesses deal with this, agencies deal with this. Every business deals with it to some degree. How do you make it as predictable as possible? I want to ask this question to start with: how volatile, you can give a percentage, like is the seasonality of your guys' business?
Wow. How predictable.
So I would say what is how low versus the highs does it get? Is it 50%?
I would say that we have 3 to 4 months that it slows down a bit based on our current.
Percentage wise, what does that look like usually for you?
It probably means on some months we're maybe 30 to 40% lower down. But the thing is, it's predictable now. So for us, a lot of our clients are more long-standing clients, and so we understand that's going to happen, and we build that in to our model. So to me, that's still not. It's not an unpredictable thing that happens. And being in e-commerce, I'm sure that your third quarter, maybe even second quarter, is hot, meaning you guys got a lot to do.
Yes.
For certain types of selling seasons, and other seasons it's a little slow.
The seasonality of our business is definitely there. And we've got several things that we do to try and mitigate that and make that better, because seasonality, I feel like you should never accept seasonality. Because
Tell me more about that.
Well, your costs don't have seasonal costs usually, unless you're not. Some businesses do, right? But like most agencies aren't hiring seasonal employees and those kind of things. Some of your costs, let's say ad costs and maybe some contractors, those are flexible and dynamic based on the workload. But in general, your costs are fixed. So I just think seasonality is never good, because either you're overworked or you're underworked.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily a good thing. It might be the reality a lot of times. But I don't think it's the right thing. What do you think? What about you, Bob?
I think I'm sitting here trying to compartmentalize this whole subject, because I think it's such a big subject, right? Like stable income. Like, what does that mean? There's the whole side of me that immediately goes to, well, if you want to stabilize your income as an agency, first that has to do with like your outgo of money, right? So you've got to address that issue for, your whole year. Are you growing and adding people and then adding to your expenses, and therefore you've got to then turn around one day and you're like, oh, we've got to change our sales process. Lots of things to talk about. But I think I agree with you, Ken, in that we've got to get away from chasing seasons and chasing opportunities, and really establish what we're all seeking is that stable year-long security. I know in the past I would encourage people to go back and listen to the episode where we talked about how do you manage the funds and you put back X amount of yearly income. I know you guys have talked about that in your agencies. One of the things we do that I'd like to unpack a little bit is the way that you engage customers and clients has a lot to do with stability of your income. So I know we try to go after 12-month retainers as much as we can because one of the big things is stability of income.
Right.
You can count on that no matter what. And the clients are locked into that. And if they, it's not that we can't be flexible, but if they come up on month 8 and go, we're a little tight right now, can you turn off and pause the retainer? Usually the answer is no. You signed a contract. We're counting on that. Obviously, we can be flexible to some degree. So, but there is a stability there. So definitely the types of engagements that you go for, I think has to be talked about.
Let's talk a little bit about that because we have, like most of our clients are on some type of retainer. Sometimes they're on 12-month retainer. Sometimes they're on a little shorter retainer. We try not to do too short because it's not even worth it. I mean, it's kind of silly to do a 2-month retainer.
What is the lowest retainer you'll do?
Typically, maybe at 4 months with it automatically renewing by itself if something doesn't change. 6 months for sure is considered low. Like for me, 4 and 6 months would be kind of like just, it's just kind of appeasing the customer and saying, hey, there's some kind of commitment there at least.
But you'd average at that 12 months.
Yeah, I'd like to get 12 months, if not even further.
Yeah, that's the norm.
I mean, a lot of clients who are customers or businesses that are looking for agency specifically, they'll be willing to do it. If they're looking for an AOR agency of record, they might sign a 2-year contract at some level just to be as a core retainer, not.
And you can offer them discounts for that too.
Yeah, as a core retainer, not just a. They might spend more with you, but that core retainer, they're retaining the agency.
And I would expect that. I mean, the truth is probably the earlier stage businesses would be the ones that would be trying to get shorter retainers. And usually, let's address the root cause of that. Like typically that's that they're just not sure, right? Like they're uncertain about, is this going to work? And if I commit to 12 months before knowing if it's going to work, I could go out of business or whatever. And so, addressing the root cause of like, okay, maybe we can do a short period of time that then renews to, maybe 12 months or something like that.
Yeah.
But
it's interesting because we have specifically one client that we've been trying to get on some type of retainer, and they're just like, no, we don't want a retainer. We'll pay full price. And we've been offered them, like a discount and everything just to get more longevity. And the funny thing is they have been so loyal. You'd think they're on a retainer. In fact, in the end, I think we've probably done better because they weren't on a retainer. And they just kind of want to work in this kind of context where we sit down and and they're very nimble and they pivot quickly, which they have to in their industry. It's not like they're indecisive; they just have to pivot. It's just part of their mindset. They're a startup, and so we pivot with them, and it's been awesome. And they're awesome clients, and they're super loyal. And you build those relationships with those customers, and it's like, we're kind of like. We're not on a retainer, but we're, we have this Jedi thing going on that we...
Well, when there's more stickiness aside from the contract, it's always a better thing. The challenge is you don't control everything.
Yeah.
And that's why you can't, from an agency perspective, I know we're all over the place, but you can't just depend on that.
Yeah.
Because, when you got employees that are dependent on it and, you've got to hire accordingly.
And we do forecasting,
you need
like
something else.
We'll look at our full year forecast and and then start breaking it down to quarters of what we look like, what our financial bottom line is going to look like based on what we have on our docket and our retainers. And it is more difficult when you don't have the retainers to understand exactly what's going to come in. In fact, typically what we do is we just kind of work on the conservative side, and we're always more than what we've estimated. 100% of the time, we're always more.
Yeah.
So we always go conservative. Like, what if nothing else came in? What is guaranteed to us right now through a contract, through a statement of work, and then from there, knowing that we have these clients that they're not on retainer, but we know what we have on our plate for them, but there probably is going to be a few other things that we're going to have to do for them. And so we're always over, and that's fine by me. But, for me personally, there's a couple of different rules of thumb of how, like, I have times where I could bill a client more upfront and get the cash and store it for 6 months or 5 months. And, with that money, what am I going to do with it? We talked about maybe investing, but you also need it to pay. You need it liquid to pay.
You have to allocate it across the months.
So the challenge that sometimes I have is that when you're looking at your balance sheet and going, wow, we got all this, there's some money here, and you start to expand.
Yeah.
You look at it as, let's expand, let's grow, let's use it to grow. But the reality is I got to pay bills with that 6 months down the road.
Yeah.
And so should I make my billing so that it's kind of even throughout the year, or should I take it more upfront if I'm able to? And use that money, it's always a fine line.
You have to have that foresight. And I think that's one of the challenges of where this conversation came up is, it's oftentimes it can be feast or famine. If not for your business, at least for most people, the desire for their business. So new business coming in the door is either typically can be feast or famine. It's rarely flat. How do we get it flat, or how do we begin to flatten it is the question. Because when it is feast or famine, it creates some situations that are challenging, right? Like, one, you're either overworked or underworked. If you have a stable team, or you're expanding and contracting, which is, I don't think, a good thing. It creates the need for much more discipline, so that when you pull that revenue in, you're allocating it for the year because you're more, like a seasonal business would. And those can be challenging things to do all the time. So,
yep.
I don't know. That's where this came from. I'm just curious, like, for us, like, we could be there, there could be a few months out of the year that we're 50% of what our top month is, and you can almost start to, like, see with probability, again, I don't accept the seasonality thing personally. I'm just like, I think we always have to be working against that, but you can accept.
That's kind of like a scarcity model.
Which one? Accepting it? Yes.
Yeah.
I agree. Right. Yeah,
it's like, well, this is a season and there's not enough business.
Right. Yeah. So hold on, I'll just go sit down.
Right.
And accepting my position. So I don't accept it from that standpoint personally, or as a business, but you can say with high probability that these would be the months that would happen in, and it's always when you're in it, even when you know that it could be coming or whatever, always when you're in it, it's a challenge to not get into a scarcity mindset and be like, oh man, we got to hold everything back. And in a lot of ways you need to save up so that you can move in those times. Like, if your team isn't, I always have, because we're not just service. So we always have things that maybe got put aside for our own products and our own business that, then that's when that can be worked on, that might be the time when you need to, we know on the, just from being in the marketing side of things, like that might be the time when you actually have to start spending more, or at least spending smarter in marketing. You don't just pull back, because it'll obviously ripple back as well. So I was just curious if what your guys' experience was, from the top to the bottom in a typical year.
Yeah, I know I'm not the CFO or handle as close to the money as you guys are, but I am responsible for our own digital department, and I do get to sit in with the CFO, and we talk pretty transparently about that with the leadership team. One thing I notice specifically in agencies is that this sounds really, really basic, but so guys, like, call me out on it if you think I'm being too basic for this or reductionist, but I think the answer to this goes back to really investing in really good people and doing really good work. I think a lot of times the problem with stability and finances and consistency with agencies is clients just roll off, or they stop spending money with you, or you're always trying to backfill clients. Where I think if we invest in really good people and really do really good work, you're adding and you're extending and you're having those 2-year retainers. And that sounds so basic, and it's not really the topic of what we're talking about, but it really is when you really come to it. And I think sometimes we can get so caught up in all right, how do I stretch my finances out this year, that we, again, maybe get in a little bit of a scarcity mindset and say, maybe I need to be investing more and paying for better people and figure out how to do really good work.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, well, that I agree with you. I think that is that's something that's at the core of all these things. But I know we've talked a lot about retainers, but not all revenue is retainer revenue. Right. So
that's right.
I know, maybe you could argue the same thing there. But for a lot of agencies that do projects, that might be a large majority or a small majority of what they do.
Especially those agencies that are in development, that do development work. Like, it's really nice to get a $150,000 website, right? But you're gonna finish that project.
And I know with us, I try and diversify the type of revenue that comes in, because I think that's smart. And I think there's pros and cons to retainers and pros and cons to projects and other types, like there is no one, because all retainer can be challenging. Like, there's a lot of people that believe that retainer revenue is bad revenue.
Mm-hmm. You got to manage it.
I don't necessarily believe that. I'm just saying, like, there's a belief in the industry that it's bad because there's no necessarily defined completion, that you're working towards. It's kind of just ongoing, and that can be challenging to manage. You have to be very ahead of that type of thing.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because I think people hear retainers. Maybe we need to unpack what that means, because it means different things.
It does, and we have different types of retainers. Like, I think a lot of folks probably think of retainer as just a cost to hold your team, right? To get your dedicated team to you, to the point where that's just more like administrative and management of whatever. It's not actual billable hours toward a project. However, I think many retainers are that. They're billable hours towards a project. We have different, media and advertising retainers that include a certain amount of hours a month to be dedicated to a certain type of job. And so it does go, for all of ours, it goes towards something. It's not just an agency retainer just to say, okay, here's the retainer cost, and now there's actually the implementation cost.
Right.
And so I think, but there are retainers that are that. They're retaining a team of, to manage some larger accounts. Obviously,
it's like a right. That team.
It's like a retain.
You might need 4 to 5 dedicated people to run an account. I mean, if the account is larger, including a lot of administration, account relationship people, executives, project managers. And so with that being said, I mean, we don't really do that too much, because what we found is our customers and the size of our customers, they have to attribute their cost to something that they get, right? That they want to make sure that when they purchase something, that they actually get something from it. And a lot of times retainers are looked at, especially for new startups, companies that are not used to hiring agencies. They don't think like that. They don't think like, okay, I get to retain you, and therefore I have to pay for that team to retain that team.
Yeah, they may not think like that, but it is part of the reality.
Yeah,
right?
But they think
it is the reality.
Oh, okay, I'm going to get a discount for paying for 12 months of something that we're going to do, and so that money's going to go towards doing that and getting that done, and I get a service for it.
I do think that there's and we try hard to, it's not, these things rarely come up, but when they do, we're trying to be in front of them about educating around this, because I do think when you hear retainer, there's a bunch of different interpretations of that different types of experience with that from the client side. They may understand it one way, it may not be that way. But the reality is like, it's really common sense and simple, right? Like there are people at the end of these things.
Right.
People get paid, and people get paid on a regular basis. They don't get paid when the work is done. They get paid, bi-weekly or whatever that is, right? So a retainer is sort of like you have a fractional employee in a way, right? And that's why, and so you have to be intentional about leading that. And, from the client side, and even, and obviously as a good agency needs to lead that as well to the degree that they can control it. But you have to be intentional about leading that. You have to have a reason for having it. Some retainers are only if you need it, right? Like we have, we do a lot of e-commerce. We do a lot of support. We call them support retainers. And they're, if you have trouble, like if you need support, if you have trouble doing something, you're trying to get a Black Friday thing up or a promotion going, or your store's down or something like that, like that's when you can call us and we can jump into it. But there's not a set of tasks that we're necessarily working on. It's almost like insurance or having, and it's worth it because you get it for a fraction of the cost of what it would take to, hire a several $100,000 team or engineer or whatever.
So if you don't use it, do you lose it?
Of course.
Okay.
Well,
I just want to, on that, like, again, I think the mechanics just trickle down from the, through the business, right? Like, so if employees don't have rollover hours, then how can a business offer rollover hours or whatever you want to call it in the sense of a retainer? It doesn't work. And I think that's where a lot of people go out of business and break. And so I just think it goes back to that kind of like, how do the agency staying healthy is best for you, because if the agency's not healthy and they go out of business, then you're in a worse spot, or
ours is at 5x5 is strictly hourly based. So a retainer is, say you commit to a year, you get a discount on our standard hourly rate, and then you get X amount of hours per month. And so the retainer can change for each client based on, what's negotiated, the amount of work estimated. And then they get a dashboard, and those hours they're just straight agency hours can be applied to everybody in that's working on their account. So even if it's a junior level client manager to a high level, VP or executive that touches it, everybody is charged the same rate. Now, they get a dashboard, so they see what's being spent every week or day. They can go in and see as hours are recorded, and people record their hours, so that at the end they can buy extra hours and say, hey, you're almost at the end. Do you want us to continue this month? Yes, at whatever the discounted hourly rate is. And they can roll over their hours if they don't use them. So it's more of a set hour block of hours. So that's not necessarily, depending on the definition of a retainer, how you retain.
It's like the old AT&T rollover minutes.
Yeah.
Remember those?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like,
remember when they didn't do it?
And usually we always use the hours because, number one, we're incentivized, because if we don't bill those for the clients. So we have to, but also I think it creates a more proactive model for the agency being a partner, and also internally to say, we've got extra hours. How can we service this client better?
I would say for us, for our agency, if we didn't have 50% of our billings being a retainer, it would be a lot more difficult to manage our cash, to understand what's coming in. So we kind of rely on that 50%, knowing that's more stable. And then, a lot of the projects we do are not weekly, daily projects. They last for months. So for a lot of the projects that we're working on. So even the ones that are not under retainer, they're typically, we have a pipeline of projects for the next 2 or 3 months out. So we know the next 2 or 3 months for most of our clients of what they're doing. Yeah. They might add a few more popcorn, change a little things here and there, but they may add some more, popcorn projects on top of that. But we at least have an understanding. And I kind of like it because it helps me to be conservative. Yeah. Because it's not like I'm like, oh man, look at all these retainers, and this is exactly what I'm going to do. Because even retainers sometimes change. And I'm telling you, like you said, sometimes you get a client that says, listen, we got to cut back. There's this pandemic, thing called a pandemic. We got to cut back. And like, well, you're under retainer. Well, we can't. I'm sorry. We're going to fire you then. No. Let's work something out. Let's that you need to work it out sometimes with your customer. So there's always changes that happen anyways. Even with a long-term retainer, sometimes things get a little bit changed here and there. Especially like, for instance, our long-term retainers, a lot of times they'll be based on certain projects, and that project may not even get implemented or started for 6 months down the road. Well, sometimes we've had it where that project has completely changed. The need for that project is no longer the same, or not needed at all sometimes. And then they look at, well, how do we take those funds that we had allocated toward you to repurpose them for something else that we need, or maybe the project changes, and we might need to readjust the retainer a little bit. So we have that happen, and it's fine. It happens, all the time. But I think the idea is for us is having at least 50% of our billing being retainer is really helpful. And I think for most agencies, if you could get there, right? Let's say right now you don't have any retainers. You're like, I don't know how to redo retainers. I just do. There's people come in and ask me for stuff, and I do it. We do it for them. We bill them. We give them an estimate and give them a statement of work.
It's the restaurant model.
Yeah, and then we service them. And then hopefully they stick around because we do really good work, and it's fine. But how do you need to start having, if you want to put a client on a retainer, you need to start having some of those conversations with them to say, hey, listen, you've been with us for 6 months. You've done X amount of dollars. If you could commit. If everything's going well, if you could commit for another 6 months or a year, we would reduce our hourly rate or give them some type of incentive to do that.
Yeah. No, I think that's so. So we covered retainers. I think we exhausted that subject. What's other ways that you can stabilize your income? I mean, what has been in your experience that has worked well, or what do you observe models like out of the box thinking? Ken, I know you're always thinking through this. I mean, one of the things that you've done, and go back and listen again, is you've moved all your clients to digital pay, not just digital pay, but a pull from their account. So you pull at the beginning of the month or throughout the month.
We're sort of, our model is sort of like a subscription model in a way, whether we're doing project or retainer. So it's because we're in e-commerce. And so we adopt that model. We adopted it probably 8 years ago. And I think that for cash flow, that's like the number one thing. It helps revenue become predictable, right, to a certain extent. But when you're talking about unpredictability, you've either got maybe what are two ways that your revenue could be unpredictable? One is maybe seasonality. And when I say revenue, maybe let's say specifically, like, let's just talk about new business for a second. Okay, so like maybe this is revenue to come, like your pipeline, but the seasonality of new business coming in specifically is what I'm talking about. And it's either seasonality, like there are certain seasonal changes, or there is a maybe lack of maturity in your marketing engine. I would think if I look at any business, it's one of those two things. And I think that's true with agencies, right? Like you have to have marketing, you have to be filling a pipeline, just like any other business out there. I think it's Mark Cuban that has a quote that's like, if you don't have an engine that regularly gets people into your world, or consistently or automatically, I can't remember the word he used, gets people into your world, then you don't have a business. And you have a hobby. That's a little pointed and definitely kind of cuts, but I think it's probably true if you think about it.
That's good.
So I don't know. I mean, I'm always thinking on those two sides, like how do you mitigate seasonality? Well, for us, seasonality tends to be in the types of services people need. And so, in our world, there's a time in Q4 where everyone puts their head down and starts working on their promotions and selling and all that kind of stuff for the holiday season. And so we're often helping people do that. But if people aren't in the door before that, typically new business slows down pretty dramatically there. And it just depends, but like that happens, and there are definitely emergencies. And, I guess we're somewhat well known in that industry. And so we have people reaching out, but in general, like that would be the seasonality of our business. And so how do we mitigate that? Well, we do classes, we do trainings, we do coaching and marketing, that kind of stuff around those things that are easy to start and much smaller. And we do those things primarily in that period of time.
Yeah. So you're talking about
we're starting our e-commerce boot camp.
Alternative streams of income,
here.
passive streams of income, additional streams of income. As an agency,
I think you have to think about what kind of services are your clients looking for at different times a year. That's one size seasonality.
Are you guys intentional about going after certain clients that don't overlap with other clients that are seasonal?
Yes.
So that you're not building all your business on one season?
I'm a huge believer in going after clients that have universal appeal and that aren't affected by seasonality. Healthcare, certain types of services, even entertainment. I mean, that can be seasonal, but now it can. But just finance, education. These are all things. They certainly have their ups and down times, but they're a little more consistent.
Education is a little seasonal.
Yeah, Can be.
We do higher ed, and it's
but,
seasonal a little bit.
Yeah, but today so much of it's online that it's becoming less and less seasonal.
You're right, it is.
Yeah, fintech, financial technology, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
No, I think that's smart. And I think that's one way to mitigate seasonality is understanding, how you maybe even if you can't get, because everyone does probably have a season. Different ones are less extreme than others. But, at least not have the overlap be exactly the same, as you're going after it.
Exactly. But if you do end up like specializing in a vertical that is very seasonal, I think you hit the nail on the head. Is like on the off season, those people don't close their doors. They just, do other things, or they reallocate their funds. But during that time, that's where you have to get creative and say, we're not just going to have feast or famine twice a year, but we're actually going to, during those off times, provide additional services for those clients. Maybe create, like you said, courses or training, or maybe that's the type of agency that really needs to focus on honing in their retainer and be like, maybe we have a flexible retainer. Maybe this time of the year it shrinks by 20% and then it goes back to the normal size. And those are all options.
I think I think that as far as the seasonal thing goes, maybe that's our fault as agencies, is that we don't plan out our customer business correctly. Maybe we fill in that time where we normally are a little more down, try to sell our clients on. That's a time that we're building. That's a time that we're looking for the future. That's future time. We're not doing active things to launch a campaign, but we're going to be talking about where we're going to use that time to talk about the next 2 years with your business and where you're going to go. And do you provide that leadership ability and you fill it in? And that also gives you some more grounds later to have more of a long-term client anyways, because you're providing them, again, forward, intentional, thoughtful, future planning, and trying to understand that. So I think a lot of that has to do with the way that us as agencies might think a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great point. So I'll give you an example of this. Kind of goes more into sales, but we had a client recently come in and say, we're on retainer with them and we're doing lots of work. One particular aspect of their business, they said, we're hiring, we're going to go with this agency that specializes in Amazon. They just do Amazon. They're like heavy hitters. And we really feel like for this piece. So in effect, what they were saying was, we need to carve out some of your budget to put to that. And then once we blow up Amazon, then we'll come back and start putting it back into direct to consumer in other ways. Right. Well, I think, you can sit there and go, okay, that's fine. Or what we did was I went back with my team and said, I think certainly we don't want to We want to allow the client to go where the expertise is, and certainly we aren't big experts in that area at this point. However, what we did was we said, there's a whole world outside of Amazon that needs to be addressed. And when you're going to launch a big Amazon launch, you have to have all these things outside of Amazon in place. So I went back to the client and said, hey, that's great, and we're going to support you however we can help with this other agency. However, here's 5 things that you need to be doing outside of Amazon if you're going to launch on Amazon to get you ready. And I said, oh, by the way, Amazon just launched a program where they reward the seller's fees an extra 10% for when you drive customers outside of Amazon in, right? Because Amazon likes that when you drive outside of their ecosystem, so they get new members. So we just outline those things. And so thinking more like that with clients to say, how can we service them and offer them things that they may have said to you, we need to use money elsewhere, or we can't hire you for this. I think that goes back to my original point, which again is you just do good work and you hire good people, and you always look for those opportunities. When a client says, we're going to hire someone else, or we're going to cut back our retainer, or we're seasonal, there's always an opportunity. There's always something you can do for that client to help them push forward.
And I also think a lot of the seasonal thing you have to, again, going back, is we never have people just bored sitting there twiddling their thumbs on those on the seasons that are slow. Like, not slow, but I wouldn't even call them slow. They're just on the they don't bill as much for a customer. It feels like we're either hustling or double hustling.
Yes,
it's like that's
a good phrase.
Right?
That's
we're
funny.
hustling or we're double hustling. It seems like that's what we do, and maybe that's good or bad. I don't know. I mean, we don't want to
probably not good.
We don't want to burn our people out by any means, but we also don't. I don't want people sitting around twiddling their thumbs, going, "Well, it's an off season. My client's slow, and
exactly,
and this is the only client I have, and I'm twiddling my thumbs right now for the next month, doing nothing."
No,
there's always something to do. I mean, there's always something that you can be thinking about.
Well, if there's not always something to do, and I don't mean busy work, but from a
smart work.
Yeah, smart work. But I mean, like, if there's not always something to do, then there's a problem, because, like, for me, like, I've got a stack of, like, milestones that I believe we need to hit that have nothing to do with any one client necessarily, but just as a purpose in our business and what we're supposed to be doing. And so there's always something to do.
Yeah.
The challenge is does that something create revenue right now or in the future? And you have to balance that appropriately.
And this really goes back to, we talked about this before, about capitalizing your business and having like 1 year of capitalization for your business. So this also kind of ties into that as well, so that you're not surprised by anything. Like, you should be able to support enough that if it got slow and something else happened and it slowed down and your revenues weren't as strong as you thought they were going to be, that you're able to survive and not have to worry about the next month or next month. You have some cushion to be able to make some decisions.
I believe that one of the biggest challenges and things to keep in mind if you're in a slower period, or if you have those slower periods, or if we all have those. It happens all the time, like those months where it's like was unexpected, right? It's down. I'm talking primarily about new business, and it was unexpected. And so one of the biggest challenges is not getting into a scarcity mindset. And I know that's kind of like a buzz term, but it to me, there's a practical benefit of that. Like, once you get to the state where you're holding on to everything, and it's not, then you're in a rigid state, and you're not able to flow, and you're not able to move, you're not able to create. You're in a mindset that is not conducive to getting out of that position. So you end up just staying in that position, and even potentially shrinking down and kind of going down, just clinging to something. And so I think one of the biggest things to keep in mind is, how do you, when many of the indicators around you are like you should retract, how do you stay in a balanced mindset where you're like, okay, yeah, we should pull back here, but we should also like not like freak out, and we should be aggressive in these ways, because that's actually what's going to get us out of this, and this is unlikely to be like something that continues. every business has to go through that, but the leader, I think, needs to have a mindset of balance and stability. And I often see that is not the case. I mean, I work with a lot of young entrepreneurs who have really, kind of like almost overnight success, businesses that never overnight, but like, that happens. But they get to a place of like, oh wow, we're actually, now this is a real business. It's making money, that kind of thing. Now you hire a team, and now all of a sudden they've got a few like blips and things like that. And sometimes if they don't have experience, they completely freak out. And they're like, we got to cut everybody. We got to do this and that.
Yeah.
And that's never a smart thing, I don't think, to do. And I think that actually can create a cycle that ends up, basically spinning down and becoming worse.
Yeah.
It's good. Good discussion, guys. Any last thoughts or comments on or tips for those people listening?
No,
on
if
how
anyone
to
knows how
stabilize
to
their revenue,
create predictable revenue long-term forever, I mean, reach out to me. I'd love to know it.
Yeah, let's. I'd love to get feedback and to see some of the best practices, things that, as an agency, you guys do out there to overcome this. I know for me personally, I think it's just try to forecast as much as possible, be conservative. That's my approach. But everybody's different, and
one thing we haven't talked about, and we can save, this would be a good topic for another episode, is creating services that are recurring revenue, that are, whether it be subscription models to a piece of software or a tool or a CMS, or, there's pros and cons of that either way, but that's a whole, that right there is certainly one method for sure.
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely.
All right, guys, till next time.
Talk to you later.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.